I had started my own personal development journey, which is part of my story. So I had been operating from my head for most of my life, and specifically after my sister died when I was 14. And so then I did an emotional intelligence leadership program, and I signed up for the leadership because emotional intelligence didn't apply to me at the time. Because early on in my career, I was told by a director that, in not these exact words, but basically we are salespeople and not psychologists, so they don't care about feelings. So that's how I learned to develop myself as a salesperson in IT, and I'm in this course for emotional intelligence leadership and learned how disconnected I had been from my heart since really I was 14, and got connected to my heart for the first time in my life. Then I started trying to figure out, how do I navigate this new version of myself, because it felt so authentic and it felt like me while working in this corporate IT sales role where I was told that we're not allowed to have feelings. And so I'd been struggling with this and committed to continuing to do my own work. And then on January 23rd, 2018, I opened my laptop and saw an email from our CEO that a coworker had died by suicide in our company's headquarters. And my heart broke, and I had tears in my eyes, and I was just like, this is not okay. And I felt responsible for not doing better to be more authentic and stand for emotional intelligence in our workplace. So I emailed our CEO, and I gave that feedback. And, I acknowledged that there were things working, but this feedback is really critical that we create change. And didn't hear back from him right away. And after a few days and learning that this coworker had been let go the Friday before, my rage and anger was actually starting to build, because I was like, we've got to do something. This is unacceptable. And I received an email from our CEO who acknowledged me and agreed. And he then connected me with the VP of our HR. And I was like, yes, change is going to happen. And I contacted the emotional intelligence trainer that I have a relationship with. So we started to have conversations with our VP of HR, and I really felt like we were on this path. And then less than 2 months later, I woke up to my own reality. And the reality that I had been harassed and discriminated against as a female and a minority in the industry my whole entire career. And I hadn't been standing up for myself. And it got so bad that it woke me up. And I decided to take action. And it's been a wild journey since, because there was retaliation from my manager for doing so. And I chose to stand for transformation at that point by being the best employee I could be, because I said, what else do I have to lose? He's already looking to fire me for speaking up for myself. And so,
how would you speak up? What would you say?
When when this happened, so I actually, I already knew that the engagement between me and this manager wasn't working. I had information from my previous manager, who was a woman, that they did not want me to be successful, and she had already advised me to look for another job. And I was working on my path to transition out, and I said one more year, because of the financial security, and I was getting certified as part of my for coaching to start my own business. So I said one more year, and this happened in March. So it was early on in that one more year. So when this incident happened with my manager, with him yelling at me again for a mistake I had made, which had already been resolved with the client, I just knew it in my body, like this wasn't okay. I was experiencing shame, but this time I knew what that felt like. So I had the awareness of the shame I was feeling. And so I had the tools now to know how to get support and to stand for myself. So that was a big distinction this time, is although I was experiencing normal things like I'm a bad employee, I'm going to be fired, who would ever want to hire me again, I knew this time that that was not the truth. Even though I could hear those voices saying it, I knew. And so I immediately went into survival, in a sense, which my version of survival is getting things done. And so I went to our employee handbook and I read, like, what's the protocol? Because this is my manager. And so typically I would go to my manager, but this is the person harassing me. So I reached out to the HR person in our group who I had not had success in the past getting support from. It's typically, and most people say this, it's known that they'll make me the problem, but I still followed protocol by reporting it. And then I found we had an ethics company. So I reached out to our ethics company and they asked if I wanted support and resolution. And I said yes. And I was hopeful that that's what they were there to do. And they assured me there'd be no retaliation. And I that was new to me. I'm thinking, why would there be retaliation? I'm looking for support. So that raised a flag. And then they put me back into contact with other people from HR. And then they started asking me about what happened. And it took over 2 hours of interviewing me because of all the incidents I had to report. And then 12 days later, I was put on a performance plan by my manager. And so I immediately pushed back to HR. I said, you said there would be no retaliation. What is this? They put it on hold. And then in that period of time it was on hold, I actually got my annual review from the same manager, and he gave me successful because I was over plan. I was over plan, 100% over plan in all 4 sales categories. So when HR came back, they said, I have good news and bad news. The good news is, as you know, you don't have a performance issue because you got successful on your review. The bad news is your manager's still putting you on a performance plan. And at that point, I realized I needed to get more support for myself outside the company, which I did. And so created a plan with an attorney and looked for other options, asked if I could report to someone else, asked if I could apply for a different position, and asked if they wanted to negotiate an exit. And they denied the first 2, offered in severance that was less than my commission check that month. I'd worked for this company for 11 years. So I decided, okay, I guess this is going to look different than I expected. And at that point, I decided, well, then they're just going to have to fire me. And I'm going to show up every day and do the best job I can and lead from my heart. And that was something I had been avoiding because of the consequences. And so now I'm like, okay, so are you going to fire me for leading from my heart? And I just, every morning, I decided to be the best coworker. So all my coworkers who would complain and have stress, I became like the best listener and encourager and supporter. And my clients who were stressed, I went in there and again became the best listener and encourager, and you guys have got this. And the harassment from my manager doubled down. And it got real. And so now he's looking for anything and everything to fire me. And it stretched me and it pushed me. I got a lot of work done as it relates to shame, because every time I questioned if I was wrong or if I was bad, then I got to do that work and get back to the truth of who I am. And so by the time I was terminated, I was on 2 PIPs, neither of which I signed. And by the time I was terminated, I was ready. I felt empowered. I felt like the work that I had done in that year, standing for myself, standing for women. I can't tell you how many women would share their stories with me, and they had no idea what was going on with me because I couldn't speak about it for the advice of my attorney. And so being a listening ear for them, I knew that change is starting to happen. And so by the time I was terminated, it felt right. Although it's still a grieving process, because this is relationships I had for 11 years. And the company told my coworkers not to contact me, not to reach out to me. It hurt. And I'm still grieving a little bit from that experience. However, it has just continued to drive my passion into transforming corporate culture, because our lives are worth more than our jobs. And to see how people sacrifice their lives over a job every single day, I learned that I had put so much of my own worth into a job. And so by this happening, I became honest with myself that I've been selling myself out over a job.
For a decade. Over a decade.
Over a decade, for 18 years. Yeah.
What are you up to now? Because you've made leaps and bounds, and tell us all the things. What are you up to now?
Yeah, so now I've started my own coaching business. Yeah, and just this week, actually, I was working with a dear friend who is super compassionate, and he's like, who are you compassionate to coach? And I've learned, and in my heart, I'm compassionate to coach veterans. And so right now, I'm focusing on my one-to-one private coaching, and super compassionate to coach veterans who are natural-born leaders, who have sacrificed their life and chosen to do that at the age of 18 for most. And it's like such a gift and something so little I can do to work with them and get them back into their hearts and learning their inherent worth and value and their natural-born leadership qualities. So that's something I'm up to. And then I'm also up to creating corporate training for change management. And so I work with, in my coaching style, shifting the perspective that we have 3 intelligence centers, which is our head, our heart, and our gut. And so in the corporate space, there's a lot of mindset coaching, and there's emotional intelligence, leadership coaching, and those are so important. And what I'm here to develop and offer is more of that gut instinct and supporting ourselves in organizations to create awareness or notice when there's resistance. So that's how change can happen a little quicker.
Wow.
Yeah.
For that woman that is feeling like you did before you were awakened, what would you tell her?
Gosh, that's a great question, because I'm on a board for women in technology. So I see those women. I see my reflection now. And I've just decided to continue to be a positive and encouraging mentor to these women. And I think the best thing I can offer and say is, you are valuable, you're worth it. Listen to your gut and surround yourself with the people that are nourishing your strengths, your voice, your leadership. Find those people. Just make it your job to surround yourself by the people that are encouraging you and strengthening you, because it's challenging to be a minority. And when you find your voice, it can be challenging to speak up because other people might question it. So just surround yourself by the people who say, I've got your back. And I just want to say, what Nellie's up to is an incredible resource for that. And seeing what you're creating for women, for allies, sponsorship, mentors, it's so important right now. Because as women, I believe we've been trained and conditioned over centuries to not support each other. And that's changing. And trust that. And it might feel weird and it might feel uncomfortable, but believe that there's so many women and men who want to see you shine.